Hey there, it's Vicki Booten here with a Brayer and two-tone stencil background process video. I created a layout using a bunch of Vicki Booten mixed media, and I really love how it turned out. So there's lots of layers here with some stencils, Brayer, stencil brush, watercolors, and some glazes. So I have all of the products that I'm going to show you as the video starts, and here's a closer look at the layout. So to get started, I gathered my watercolor set, and with every color product, I like to swatch it out. So I have the swatches there so I know what I'm using. I have a Brayer, I have rose gold glaze, and the gold glaze that I'm going to do a two-tone effect with. I grabbed a stencil brush, and I have some stencils in 3 different patterns. Those come out of both of the new sets of stencils that I have, and a paintbrush to mix the paint, and of course my backgrounds are always done with the foundations paper. Again, that paper is 140-pound weight. I love it. It's great for wet mediums. So this is the background I'm going to be working on, and I'm just going to clean this up and get started. So I love doing brayered backgrounds. This is a great, easy, super easy way to layer your colors onto the background. So I picked 3 different shades of watercolor tube paint, and I'm going to just get started. I started with the blue here. It doesn't really matter which one you go with. You don't need much of this paint at all. There's tons of pigment in it. So I just put some paint on a clear acetate sheet, and I'm going to add some water to blend the paints and make them a watercolor. So once I had the consistency of paint that I needed, I just rolled my brayer through. And you're going to notice when I do this, I'm kind of tapping or hopping the brayer on the page. So it's kind of a tapping, rolling process just to start building the layer and paint application that I wanted here. You don't want full coverage, so it's kind of nice to layer the paint on top. Another fun way to use this is you could let that first layer dry and then go ahead and reapply some blue if you wanted to create some depth. But I love that kind of streaky effect. And then I thought it would be fun to take some of that leftover paint and run a stencil through it and do some stencil stamping. So I'm covering the stencil with a bunch of paint. Make sure you have full coverage, and then grab your layout background or whatever you're putting it on, and then just press that down in place. And then to avoid getting the paint on your hands or spreading around the layout, I just clean that up with a paper towel. And then you have this kind of fun impression. Because I wanted to get moving on to the next color, I just tapped some of that paint off with a paper towel, but you could go ahead and let it dry. Now I'm going to go in with some of the yellow because I thought the yellow and blue would kind of make a fun background, nice color, complement each other. So I'm just again adding some water to the paint to make a watercolor paint, and then rolling the brayer through and repeating the technique I just did with the second color. Going in some of the open areas so I can get nice coverage with the yellow, and then just layering that on again with that kind of rolling and hopping technique. So once I'm happy with this coverage, I'm going to do the same thing with the stencil in the yellow. In probably that bottom left-hand corner, I think will be nice. So again, just take your stencil and drag it through the paint until you have nice coverage on the back of the stencil, and then put it in place, and again use a paper towel to just pick up any excess paint and also to push the paint onto your background. I had a little bit extra paint on the stencil, so I just moved it and stamped again. And then of course clean off all of your stencils so the paint doesn't stay on there, and you don't forget and use it again and have yellow paint when you wanted pink. So I'm going to go in now with some orange and again blend out the paint. I have clean water now, and I want this to be a little thicker, so I didn't put a ton of water there. And I chose a script stencil, and I'm going to load my stencil brush up with some watercolor paint, but I don't want it to be too wet because it will bleed underneath the stencil. And then I'm just rubbing some of that orange on there, and I love that effect. So it's nice that you can use a stencil brush, just holds just the perfect amount of paint, and when the paint is a little bit wet, it is quick and easy application. So I just went in and added 2 sections of the script background in the orange. And look at that, was really fast. That didn't take long at all. Once the paint completely dried, I went in and I decided I wanted to have a textural layer. So I thought it would be fun to take some of the gold glaze, and I'm putting it on the clear acetate sheet that I like to use for my palette. And then clean off your palette knife so you don't contaminate the other color. And I'm taking some rose gold glaze and putting it right beside so I can do a two-tone effect with the 2 colors. So I chose the butterfly stencil. You need to be careful when you have stencil with wide openings like this so you don't push the product underneath the stencil. It might happen a little bit. You might have a little bleeding, but it's okay. And then I just went around and moved, so I had little stripes of gold and the rose gold through the stencil. Pick that up and you have a great impression. Make sure you clean your stencil in case it bled underneath. And then I went ahead and added a second pattern of butterflies in the lower left corner. When you're done, make sure you clean the stencil and your palette knife and your mixing palette, the acrylic piece, right away so you can get the glaze off. It's much easier to do it while it's wet. Now that my background's all dry, I love this. It turned out really, really well. And now I'm going to add, I thought a layer of rub-ons would be perfect because in this set I have a nice gold dangle and I love these dangles, and I thought it would really complement the golds and the blues. So I went ahead and I always cut my stencil out and then remove the backing and layer them on. I thought the 3 butterflies might be fun as well, so I'm cutting those out to see if I want to use those later. So I started with a longer dangle, just peeled the backing off, positioned it, and then you just rub it in place, and then I use a wide palette knife to apply my rub-ons. You could use the popsicle stick that comes in there as well, and then just go ahead and make sure you've rubbed the rub-on onto your background. You want your background to be completely dry, or otherwise the rub-on won't stick. As well, you want to make sure that before you lift the whole rub-on off, I will lift a corner and test to make sure that it's all of the little dots, because there's tiny little beads on this dangle, and I want to make sure they all transfer. So then I'm going to go in, I love it, and add the second one. So I have a series of dangles across the top of the layout. This dangle comes in the stencil set, and it also comes in my stamp set, but I love it, and I have a thing for rub-ons. I just love that it looks kind of like a gold stamped background. I chose 2 photos from our trip to New York that were great for this color palette. There are tons of mural walls throughout New York City, so of course my kids had to go with me, and we had to take pictures at every single one, and they loved the experience because they are teenagers. So I matted the one larger photo to tie the orange from the script in, and then I'm mostly using die cuts out of my 2 die cut packs from the All the Good Things line, and just picking different pieces. I like the note. I love how the black ties the black in. You'll see there's kind of a visual triangle going on with all of the black. I layered a little circle. I'm taking a little bit of the backings out of this die cut so it looks like a torn piece of lined paper, and layering that on there. And then taking a couple other little title pieces, curling the ends so I get a little dimension when I lay that down. The Life is Good has foam squares on the back as well. And then a little birdie paper clip to tie some of the blue in. And then I'm just kind of fiddling around, making sure all the pieces kind of fit. And then another black frame. And then the frame has different sayings all the way around the edges, so I just picked the one that I thought suited the best. I added the black leaf die cut to the bottom. It really adds a little bit of structure to the bottom of the layout and gives the photos a base to sit on. The little black paper clip label that I added, I actually switched out for a turquoise one because I liked it a little bit better. Thought it might have been a little bit too much black. So I added a rub-on on there and just put it behind instead of using it as a paper clip with a foam square. And then I finished the layout off with a few of the black rub-on butterflies. Really love how this came together. So that's it. This layout took about an hour. I created my entire background using mixed media techniques. So definitely give brayering and two-tone stenciling a try. Thanks so much for joining me.